In 2002, a horrific attack in Killeen, Texas immediately touched Omaha. Ultimately, the story inspired people around the world.
Today, Bridget Kelly is a volunteer advocate working directly with sexual assault and domestic violence survivors. She also speaks publicly about the attack and what's happened since, and that's what brings her back to Omaha.
It does. We're pleased to welcome Bridget this morning to the Blend. Good to see you, Bridget.
Thank you. So
really great to see you.
Yeah, you're doing great. You look, you're happy. You're smiling.
Thank you.
Right?
Yes.
But this, it was difficult. It was 2002. Is that right?
Yes.
Take us back to that day. What happened for people that may not understand that?
So in June of 2002, I was living in Killeen, Texas. I was working as a first grade teacher at the Army post there at Fort Hood. And I arrived home very late one night after picking up a friend at the airport and dropping her off at home. I headed home. And I was getting ready for bed when a stranger broke into my locked apartment. He kicked the door down. And I was abducted at gunpoint. I was robbed at an ATM, and he took me out to a field, also at gunpoint, and I was raped and shot 3 times in the back. I played dead there out in the field, and he drove off in my car. As soon as he was away, I was up on my hands and knees and kind of assessing the damage, you know, looking down at my naked and bloody body, and was just totally focused on getting out of there. And so I was able to run out of that field and get to help.
Your dad wrote about it in one of his columns, and that's how people in Omaha first heard the story. Was that a decision for your family? Why did you want to go public with all of these details? A lot of victims wouldn't have made that choice.
Yeah, you know, I think that I was really fortunate and that I felt safe to do it. For one thing, my attacker was captured pretty much about the time I was getting out of surgery that morning. So 6 or 7 hours after the attack, he was apprehended. He was also sentenced 10 weeks to the day after the attack, which is really unusually fast. And so my dad actually went down to Texas and gave a victim's impact statement at the sentencing on behalf of our family. And so, you know, I had this feeling like, you know, this is something that needs to be talked about. And in the immediate aftermath, we were very open with our friends and loved ones about everything that had happened, you know, including the rape. And so I kind of encouraged my dad, like, yeah, this is an important part of the story. We can't, you know, how's that going to look if this story is reported and we're not being totally open about it? That I didn't want people to think that I was ashamed of having been sexually assaulted, and so he went public that way.
Well, your dad, Mike Kelly, the columnist from the Omaha World Herald, and I vividly remember the article. I know your dad now, but didn't at the time. Touched a lot of people here in Omaha. You know, did that help your healing process, and what have the last 12 years been like?
Yes, I mean, I have to say that it was such a blessing to me to be able to receive the support that I did, which was a direct result of my dad sharing my story. And he has, you know, a wonderful way with words and storytelling. And you know, of course, I had my dear friends and loved ones, my family close by, who were very supportive. But then I had this like deluge of support, of notes, letters, emails, flowers showed up, like all these notes, like from the Omaha area coming down to Texas, that this like even this like force of you know, prayers and well wishes. And I'm telling you, like, I could feel it, you know, and it made a huge difference to me. You know, there were people who I didn't even know were saying, you know, we're praying for you, and we put you on our church's prayer list, and like, I mean, I can't tell you how much that meant to me, you know. And it's just as horrific as that experience of that night was. It was like it was one of the most amazing and positive experiences to have so many people like rooting for me and encouraging me, and you know, it was really motivating too, because I was like, oh, all these people are thinking of me and want me to get better. Like, I want to show my appreciation by like getting better, you know. And it was just really wonderful.
Throughout sharing your story nationally, internationally, you met a fella. You're married and life is beautiful.
Yes.
What kind of message are you going to share at the Torchlight Ball this evening. I know they wanted you to be here for this message. What is it?
Yeah, so at tonight's fundraiser for the Torchlight Ball, I'm going to be sharing my story, but also, you know, talking about the fact that, you know, after a traumatic experience, whether sexual assault or surviving violent crime or any of the many traumas that people endure in their lives, that, you know, just you can't give up, and it might feel like you're devastated, and I certainly was. I can't tell you how much, you know, I've cried over the years about this, but you know what, you find yourself on a different path maybe than you expected, and you can always try to kind of look for the opportunities and the positive things that can come of something. And also I feel like having endured some pretty deep suffering kind of makes me feel connected to other people in a way that I didn't before, you know.
And that's so valuable, I imagine, as you're a volunteer advocate now, helping other victims while they're still in the emergency room in those early hours after attacks, that they need that help, and you're there.
Yes, yes, that's been really rewarding. I feel like, you know, when I go to the emergency room as part of my program, I'm a SAVI advocate. SAVI stands for Sexual Assault and Violence Intervention Program. It's through the Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York City. And when I go there and just to be with a survivor of sexual assault or domestic violence, it's sort of, you know, my way of honoring all of those people who gave me support 12 years ago. You know, I feel like, you know, it's an honor for me to be there for that person in this completely traumatic moment where their life is being turned upside down. You know, for me to be able to be the person who's there and answering questions and doing whatever they need, even if it's like, oh, you look cold, let me get you a blanket. You know,
reached out and grasped all those opportunities to help people. And Mary touched on it. You met a guy through all this. Your husband, was he a part of a journalist that covered your story?
Yes.
How did that?
So how I met him was I was still working. I was living in Texas in 2004, and he was working on for the ABC News magazine's Primetime in 2020, and he came down as part of reporting on my story. And we kind of hit it off. He was, you know, but it was like 3 years later that we actually dated. So it wasn't like, oh, there were sparks, you know, none of that. But I thought he was a really cool guy. And then later on, I was moving to New York for my master's program at NYU, and then we just met for lunch, and then started hanging out.
Right on town, right?
Yeah, so it was much later that we got together.
A great way to advance your story. You are now, you have all of this happy stuff happening.
Yeah.
So this event that we've talked about and touched on is the Torchlight Ball tonight. At last check, there were honestly a handful of tickets, and that's all.
Very few tickets
but still check into it if you would like to hear Bridget speak. Allaboutaomaha.org. Bridget Kelly, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so
Bridget,
much.
very nice to meet you. Thanks for
Appreciate it.
stopping by. We appreciate it.